So there are just times in life that we have to put something behind us. We have to set it aside and choose to move forward. We have to walk away and not look back. Maybe we have to leave behind a job, one that we loved or maybe one that we didn't love. Maybe we have to choose an entirely new career. Maybe it's a relationship that we have to let go of, a habit that's no longer serving us, or a way of living. Maybe we have to learn how to let go of an old resentment or a fear. There comes a time in most of our lives where we have to take stock of what we've learned from something and then choose to move forward. I discovered this for myself when I chose to leave my church in Reno and move back to California. I needed a rest from pastoral ministry, and so I decided to take a leave of absence. And I hadn't been on the job market in 10 years. I had no idea really how to put together a resume or interview for a regular job anymore. And so I was a little bit scared that I might not actually find a way to make ends meet. But it was more than that. Although I needed a rest, I also knew that I would miss pastoral ministry. I would miss my congregation. I still felt called to ministry, even though I needed a break. And I was scared that if I took that break, maybe I'd never get another appointment. Maybe I would never be a pastor again. I remember in particular at the end of that last worship service, serving communion and lifting up the bread and the cup and thinking, I might never say these words again. There was a lot of fear and anxiety in that choice that I knew I needed to make. And then I went on interviews. I'd been a social worker before, so I thought maybe I can get a job in social work, but oh no, nobody called me back. I thought, this is not good. This is really not good. And then I got a call from the conference saying that they would like me to serve as the long-term case manager through the United Methodist Committee on Relief, helping the San Bruno fire victims. And so I spent a year working with the Red Cross and UMCOR, helping families get through what was absolutely the worst year of their lives. And I was on the job at the Recovery Center in San Bruno when the district superintendent called me and said, would you like an appointment in pastoral ministry? And I've been doing it again for 14 years. But when I left Reno, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I would get a job. I wasn't sure if I would ever be asked back into ministry. I was stepping into an unknown future. I was taking a risk, and it was vulnerable. Change is always vulnerable. And usually when we talk about change, we talk about it afterwards, and we always tell the stories of how it was the best thing in the world and everything worked out great. We know that's not always true, is it? Sometimes we try to do something and we flop miserably. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It doesn't mean we shouldn't take the risk and be willing to put aside former things to step into the future. But it's difficult. It's difficult because very often we have to set aside all of those former things and wait and wait and wait on that new thing that God has in mind to spring forth. And in the waiting, we get impatient. In the waiting, we often forget that we had a goal to begin with. We lose track of what we're doing. No one understood change and learning how to let go of the past and move into the future any better than the Apostle Paul. He talks in this letter to the Philippians about choosing to press forward toward a goal that he knows it is impossible to achieve. The goal of knowing God, knowing Christ, knowing our humanity, knowing the nature of life. And even though we will never fully achieve it, he says, don't give up. He recognizes that we'll never reach perfection, but there are two things that we must do. Forget the past and look to the future. Forget the past, look to the future. That's what's required. If anybody had a past to forget, it was Paul. We know Paul's story pretty well, although we often forget it, right? We know that he was an incredibly well-respected, accomplished Pharisee. He was as perfect at his religious tradition as a human being could be. He knew all the practices, all the doctrines. He lived his faith fully and well, until the moment that he got so upset about those new Christians violating the traditions and doctrines and policies that he decided to persecute them, put them in prison, and sometimes ensure that they were killed. Even in the midst of this, though, we know that Paul changed. He had an experience of the risen Christ on the road to Damascus, and it changed everything for him. He moved from someone who was so concerned about policy and tradition and order to a person who was a religious entrepreneur going all over the world, setting aside custom, setting aside rituals and traditions that others in the faith believed were utterly essential. He was someone who became completely new, but it took time and it wasn't easy. He endured poverty. He relied upon the kindness of strangers. He endured persecution and numerous imprisonments. You would think, given all that, Paul would look back at his former life, so orderly, so well respected by others, so easy in comparison to the future that he had chosen. And maybe, just maybe, he would say, you know, sometimes taking these risks for God's new thing might not be worth it. But he doesn't seem to say that. He tells the church in Philippi that he chooses to let go of every gain he had before. He counts it all as nothing compared to the goal of knowing the truth of God's love for us. And I think the truth of this essential process of living, of dying to the old and rising to the new, that happens over and over and over throughout our lives. Most of us probably do not adapt to change as well as Paul seems to. We don't like to set aside former things and step into the new. We want to hold on to the former things and drag them into the new with us, don't we? We do it all the time. It's just part of our human nature. There's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes it's because change is thrust upon us before we're ready. Not every change is one that we choose for ourselves. When something good is taken away, we don't want to let go. The former things seem much better than the present or any possible future. Even though we know we cannot live forever in memory, and that we have to somehow find a way to bring the cherished memories into the future. Other times it's hard to make change because we want to release the past. It's painful, it's not good for us, but it keeps sneaking up on us. We pick it up and we analyze it, we try to understand it, we try to make sense of it, we try to make peace with it, and we can't. So we keep picking it up again and again. But the first thing to do in order to be able to perceive God's new thing is to set aside former things. So that's what I'm going to invite us to do as we begin thinking about this new year in front of us. You got 2 index cards, or hopefully you did, as you came in this morning. So I'm going to invite you to pull out one of those index cards. It's the last Sunday before the new year, and it seems appropriate that we take a moment to reflect upon something we want or need to leave behind in this year that has been. It might be an event or a circumstance that we experienced personally, or a reaction to something that happened in the world. It might be a burden that we've carried for a really long time and we've just decided enough is enough, leaving it in 2024. We're going to give you some moments of silence to write whatever you'd like to on that index card. And then when Amelia begins playing, we're going to invite those who would like to bring those cards forward and place them in the manger at the foot of the cross. Now, one word about this. We know that it is really hard to let go of some things. Please don't fake it just because I'm inviting you into a spiritual practice. If you're not ready to let something go, even though maybe you think you need to, you don't have to bring it forward. But you might want to just write it down and say, God, I am willing to consider letting this one go if you'd work with me. But don't let it go yet. Take it with you. Pray with it. Think about it until you are really ready to let it go. We're going to give you some moments of silence, and then when the music plays, if you'd like to let that thing go, bring it forward.